Okie dokie. So, good morning to everyone, and we are going to talk about codependency, and it's really a thread that runs through so many areas of our lives. Codependency is, and kind of a short definition for codependency is getting our good feelings about ourselves outside ourselves, out of our doing, out of our doing something for someone else, then getting you know uh, our esteem from compliments and all. And so we get our good feelings about ourselves outside ourselves, but then we also get our bad feelings about ourselves outside ourselves. If those people that were making us feel good about ourselves, if they stop doing that, then we feel bad. But codependency, when I first heard about codependency, I was down at they used to have in Austin every year, they would have a whole week. It's a huge, huge workshop. And then it was a seminar type thing, conference, and they would have different workshops. And anyway, I met a woman down there, and she was the first one that started speaking about codependency. And it was Sharon Weisinger Cruz. And at that time, she was married to, and her last name was Weisinger, and then she later married Dr. Cruz. But anyway, one of the things that she had us do, I remember distinctly, we were sitting, in rows, and she asked us, I don't know the order, but anyway, each one of us had to get up and walk past the people down the aisle. And to notice how hard it was to ask people to get them to move their feet, or if they were talking and wasn't paying attention, and how we would, she didn't tell us this ahead of time, that, if you're real codependent, you don't want to interrupt anyone. So, we would be stepping over people's feet in order to get past them without just asking them, or say, excuse me. Or say. Anyway, codependency shows up in a lot of different ways. And so what Sharon introduced us to was the 4 roles in families, in dysfunctional families. And those 4 roles are very distinct in alcoholic homes, or really any dysfunctional family. If you're an only child, you play all 4 roles. If you come from a family of 2, you trade those roles out. We had 4 children, the younger 4, and each one of them played a distinct role. And it's not always in birth order, not always in, you think that the firstborn would be the hero child. Not in our family. The hero is the one that makes you look good. And so I really had several hero children. But anyway, the hero child is the one that's out there in the community making you look good. And then there it comes along the second child, and the second one is usually the scapegoat. By this time, if you're living in dysfunction, living in the disease of alcoholism or any form of of addiction in a home, the progression of the disease gets worse. And as the children are born into the family, the disease gets worse and worse. And so as the younger ones come along, they're born into a sicker family, a sicker atmosphere than perhaps the oldest one. So anyway, the hero child is the one that makes you look good. They make good grades. They are in everything, and that was my oldest daughter, Karen. She was actually our hero child, and I really abused her in a lot of ways by putting my handprint on her back, pushing her, pushing, because she could do anything. And, a lot of it she didn't want to do. She did it because I wanted her to do it, because she made me look good. She made the whole family look good. We got our names in the paper because of this child, And then the second born usually looks around and says, I don't want to be like Miss Goody Two Shoes. And what that second child becomes a lot of times is your scapegoat. Now, there is a degree of scapegoating. There in majority of the time, the addict in the family is the scapegoat, is the child that is like, and each one of these children have a role. I didn't know that I was going to really talk about the 4 roles, but this is how you get set up to be codependent, is in the family of origin. So the hero child really works diligently to help the non-addict. That's her job, or his job, to help the non-addict keep the home fires burning, help get the alcoholic sober. That hero child has a huge job. So the scapegoat looks at her and says, I don't want to do all that. I am not going to do that. That does not look like fun to me. And what they begin to do is to act out. Now, their distinct job is to, each one of these children have a job to take the focus off of the addiction. That means take the focus off the addict. Are y'all with me? So this scapegoat, they will even a lot of times start drinking with the alcoholic. I hope I have Kim's permission. She's given it to me before. Kim started drinking, her story is at age 5. She would get in her dad's pickup and, drink that. I don't know how she did it, but anyway, and then she'd smoke with him. She'd sit they'd be putting in a roof or something, and he always kind of sat back on his feet and, would smoke. And here she would be picking up his butt, smoking him. She did everything he did. And that's usually what the scapegoat does. And it's to really take the attention off of the addict, or to protect the addict. And these kids don't know that. They just suit up, show up, and fall into these roles. And so when that third child is born, a lot of times you're so busy you hardly even notice that a third child is born. When this third child is born, they turn out majority of the time of what we call the lost child. They look around and they think, I do not want any part of this chaos. So they go into their bedroom, and in the past they would be in there watching TV, playing with stuffed animals or real animals. The lost child is very much into animals and something that they can hold close to them. And also your compulsive overeaters a lot of times will be your lost child, because they will go in that bedroom and they will overeat. They'll take food to their room. And so a lot of times that lost child will start practicing an eating disorder really early. So will your hero child. Now your hero child a lot of times will be your bulimic and your anorexic, because they've got to look good, and they do look good. And, the non-alcoholic, the codependent, is the one that wants the hero child to look good, because then it makes them look good. So that lost child comes along, and they go in the room and they learn early on to not ruffle any feathers, because they watch what's going on with that scapegoat. And they think, I don't want to be like that, and I don't want to have the burden that this hero child has, so I'm just going to sit in my room and I'm going to become mediocre. Now, when I say mediocre, your lost child could make as good a grades as the hero child. Children that come out of alcoholic or addictive families usually, and research bears this out, usually have a very high IQ coming out of any form of addiction. They come out and majority of them are very smart kids. So they have to be to figure out the family system that they live in. And so this lost child uh, purposely does not want to make really good grades because she doesn't want a lot of attention brought to her. Now, the lost child sometimes will, in spite of themselves, make very good grades because they're very capable. But they just really don't want any attention drawn to them. And then this last one is usually called the little oops. That none of these kids basically are planned. Maybe the first one is, and after that, these kids usually come out of make-up sex from the parents, having, one getting drunk, one trying to kill him, and then they make up. Anyway, you get the picture. So this last child is what we call the mascot, because they look around and they think this family needs a little bit of lightening up. This will be your comic. This kid will be the one. I don't care what's going on, they're going to make you laugh. They're the clown. And they are cute, precious, and darling. A lot of times this will also be your child that's your ADHD kid because they're just hyper all the time and they don't really get in a lot of trouble. They could. They have the same, opportunity, but most of the time they just want everybody to have a good time and quit being so serious. That is their job, to make everyone kind of lighten up, So I used to laugh about, I would say to myself and others that I thought I was born codependent. Well, that was more true than I knew. We are born into codependency if you're born into any form of a dysfunctional family. And what a dysfunctional family is where the roles are not even. Where the parents, there's not a distinction between the parents and the kids. Where there is some kind of chaos going on in the home that takes the focus away from the parents. And so getting back to the scapegoat's job is really to take the focus off of the alcoholic. Now, they don't know this, but that's their job. And the scapegoat, a lot of times, is the one that will get the family help because they're the one that's out here acting out and, getting in trouble and using drugs and alcohol and and, getting your name in the paper for, being arrested or being in juvenile court. And we see this a lot where that scapegoat will show up in juvie and maybe they've been there 2-3 times and the judge will give them a choice of going into a facility, like jail, or going to treatment. And the parents usually jump on that and they will send the kid to treatment. And we see this a lot. When we were doing inpatient, we saw it a lot. We would get the scapegoat. And if you want to know who's the healthiest in the family, it's usually the scapegoat. Because they know they have a problem, because they have created the problem. That is their job, to create chaos, to take the focus off of the addict. So, that's their job. And so we get a scapegoat in, and usually addicts can be so, the personality of an addict. I'm addicted to addicts, An addict has an addiction to a substance, and I've always had an addiction to an addict. Not anymore, I'm in recovery, thank God for recovery. But anyway, we get a scapegoat in treatment, and then immediately we would start notifying the family about Family Week. And so we'd start calling, their siblings, by this time they're grown, but start calling the siblings, or not grown, but older teenagers, and then the parents, and, out of the family system, the one you can count on to show up. I don't know if y'all got that figured out or not. The one that you can show up that is going to be there is the chief enabler, and that's the codependent. That is the one that is helping the addict stay sick. That is the, the addict has a dependency on a substance. The co-addict has a dependency on the addict. They are dependent on their sickness. This is why the whole family must get well, because if the addict happens to get well, they are going to leave the family on the they're going to bypass the family if the family doesn't come along with them into recovery. So you cannot keep that codependent or the number one caretaker away. That's the mom, that's the mother. It's usually the wife or the mother, not all the time, but majority it is, if you're dealing with male addicts. But anyway, it's a given that they're going to be there, and then she's going to drag her husband there. She's going to get him sober long enough to go to his son's family week. So we've got them committed. And so we'll go down the list and we call the family hero. And the first thing she will say is, it's always been about him. We've always had to focus on him because he'd get in trouble and everything's about him. And no, I'm not coming to family week. I'm not going to take my time away. She'll just give us a whole speech. And then, of course, you couldn't keep her away. Wild horses couldn't keep her away. But she wants you to know that she's a busy lady and has many other things to do. And then she'll say things like, and this could be a man that's the hero child. It could be either one. But she'll say a lot of times, what are your credentials? How long have you been treating addicts? What is your success rate? That she will interview us. And, and then she'll look us up. She'll do research. She'll know everything, but she will not commit to coming to family week. She will not commit. Well, I've got this and that and something else, and she will not commit to it. But you couldn't keep her away. And then, after we get everyone called and start looking over the list, we realized we have left out the lost child. And so we call the lost child, and immediately the lost child will commit to coming. It's almost like, whew, finally, they're getting some help. Because if you want to know what's going on in a family, watch the lost child. They know, because they sit back and they watch everything else, and they learn what to do and what not to do in a dysfunctional family system. So that is the background of how people begin to become codependent. And like I said, I used to laugh that I would say I was born codependent, and little did I know I was telling the truth. I was telling the truth because I was born into a very dysfunctional family, and I became, there really wasn't any hero. Anyway, I became the caretaker is what I became. And that's where the codependency really started. And that elevates a child up. You're making decisions that's not really appropriate for a child to make. And so on one hand, you feel kind of puffed up and you feel, you're doing grown-up things, but on the inside, your insides don't match your outsides, because that fear comes in and you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what to do, so you have to make it up. So that, the lost child and the hero child are much alike. They will interchange that role. So one of the things in our happens then, and I want to briefly go over this because I want to give y'all time to talk. So I want to show you, we learned a lot about codependency and how really in the early days it was more about around the alcoholic family, like I just described, and that the caretaker or the non-alcoholic became and we didn't have the word codependency then, but they, their job was to take care of the dependent person. And the dependent person was dependent on a substance. So the was dependent on the dependent person needing them. The codependent needs to be needed. They have to be needed. That's where they get their good feelings about themselves. If they're not needed, they feel like they're not wanted. And so it's a setup from the beginning, because usually someone that's raised in an alcoholic home a lot of times will become alcoholic themselves, or swears that they'll never drink, and they're not. Every one of these kids that are raised in alcoholic homes have their untreated dry alcoholics. Really, they may not ever touch a substance, but they are have that body chemistry, the brain chemistry of an addict, and all you have to add to that is alcohol or drugs and out or food, and out will pop an addict. So, when codependency first was introduced, I heard about it 40 years ago when I was in treatment. That's the first time I ever heard the name codependency. And so then everybody got to coin somebody, but it, co-alcoholic, co-drug addict, co-sex addict. But then my friend Pia Melody came along. And, remember I said that I thought I was born codependent. Children who are raised in addictive families have that. It's almost like a gene. They have that codependency in them because they're learning to take care of someone else, or to take the feelings off of the addict or the non-alcoholic. So anyway, Pia came along, my friend Pia Melody, who's written many books, and she came up with codependence instead of codependency. And the model that Pia came out with was that codependence is set up in childhood. And that is the model that we use at Shades. That codependence is set up in childhood from any form of childhood abuse, abandonment, or neglect. Now, it doesn't take a huge amount of abuse to affect a child. Now, we get people that have been, huge abuse, that have been abused as children. And then we get them from looking good families. Wealthy families, or families, highly religious families, or looking good families on the outside, and no one would ever suspect that there's a problem there. And what happens is that a child is given a role early on, and usually their job is to make the family look good. So Pia knew, she was a nurse. She was an RN and worked at a treatment center, the Meadows, out at Wickenburg, Arizona. And she was working with alcoholics, and she had a little drinking problem herself. And it wasn't a real big drinking problem, but it was a drinking problem. And, it's really frowned on if you miss work on Monday morning or leave early on Friday. That's a dead giveaway for an addict, And so she was there, a nurse, working in an alcoholic facility, and while practicing her addiction, and sometimes not showing up at work on Monday morning, that type of thing, or having to start the weekend early and take it off at noon on Friday. So nevertheless, she showed up, went to treatment, another treatment center for alcoholism. They did some kind of an intervention on her. She went to treatment. But she felt like that there was something else underlining. She couldn't get what was wrong with her. She had a little problem with alcohol, but she started watching the other addicts in that treatment center. And then she went back to the Meadows and started watching the addicts there, observing them. And then she started getting them, she would pull them off to the side and start interviewing them or start questioning them about their childhood. And so this is how all of this started. She started questioning about their childhood. And how she knew to do that is she was married to the director of the Meadows, and his name was Pat. And he came from one of those normal families. He knew Pia didn't. He knew that Pia came from a very dysfunctional family. So he actually was in the background teaching Pia how to have, if you didn't come from a healthy family, how to become a healthy adult. And so through all of this, she began to see that there would be some of the alcoholics that came in, drug addicts, they would get it, they would get clean and sober, they would go home, they'd go to meetings, they would follow directions, they'd get well. Live in wellness, forever and always. They'd come back to reunions, they'd be clean and sober, and they just had a, wonderful life. But then there'd be some that would struggle and struggle and struggle. Now, not all of these, there's no absolute in any of this, but some of them that had a lot of struggle staying sober would be the ones that she would start interviewing when they'd come back after a relapse. She'd start talking with them and find out that there was some kind of abuse in their childhood. And that's where she began to look at codependence and how that is set up in childhood, and then how it plays out in our adult life. I'm going to briefly go through this for you because it's just good information not to pass it on. And I'm going to name this tune in just a few minutes. It's not going to take me long. All right. But notice if you can find yourself in this process. See if you can find yourself in this. Okay, so I want to tell you what the normal characteristics of a child. Children, babies are born very valuable. There's not a child on the face of the earth that is not born valuable. All children are born valuable, and they're vulnerable. They're vulnerable. They get to planet earth. They can't take care of themselves. They're very vulnerable. Every child is. And guess what? Children are perfectly imperfect. Babies get on planet earth and they're perfectly imperfect, just little bundles of joy, but there's, and they look perfect, but we're all perfectly imperfect. And guess what? They're little dependent creatures. Babies are dependent on other people to take care of them, and they have needs and they have wants. This is the normal process of children. Y'all with me? All of us have this. And then guess what? Babies are born immature. They are immature. They do not have the knowledge of an adult. They don't, because they're just little immature creatures. Okay, now if they are born into healthy families know this, and they cut these babies some slack, and they start teaching them from an early, and I want to stop, and all of y'all have met my grandson Spencer, and I want to tell you, Spencer had some of the best parenting of any child I have ever observed. Now, I am, maybe a little prejudiced, but I do have sense. And that young man has grown into a fabulous young man. And his parents could teach parenting classes. And they were very protective about Spencer. They were very intentional about their teaching toward him. Two school teachers, what can you say? Former school teachers, but they had a heart that they wanted to be a good parent to that child. And the results is in Spencer. So anyway, I'll just have to throw that out. But you have, and so he was allowed to be all of this, and a lot of children are, but anyway, I'm just mentioning Spencer. But he had these natural characteristics of a child, and they allowed him every stage of that. But if you're born into dysfunction, if you're born into a very sick system, parents do not honor this. They do not honor that natural characteristics of a child. They try to make children more than they are. So if you are born where there is any form of dysfunctional, children are smart, so they pick up dysfunctional survival traits. These are traits to just survive. And what it is, they begin to feel less than or better than. You show me an adult child of an alcoholic, and I'll talk to them 5 minutes and tell you they either feel less than, they have put themselves, and parents a lot of times do that. They put themselves up here on a pedestal, and a lot of times parents do that in dysfunctional homes. Instead of letting a kid be a kid, they'll put them up here on this pedestal. And so they grow up feeling better than, or they're down here on the bottom feeling less than. And I will tell you, as a clinician, it's much easier to work with them when they're way down here on the bottom, because they know they have a problem, and to help them come back up when you're working. And Jeff's laughing over there. I'm not going to diagnose him over here, but anyway, when you work with people that have been put up, and I want to say they were put up there. Children don't know to climb up there on that pedestal. They're put up there. And so when you get someone that's put, that's way up there on the pedestal, it's hard to get them back down into reality. I've worked with ministers. I worked with this high dollar, well-known minister, and anyway, it's been 1,000 years ago, and he wanted to just come do an intensive. We had it out of town, but he wanted to come do it just so he could kind of, he didn't really need it. He wanted to see what it was before he recommended someone. My God Almighty, he's one of the sickest ones I've ever had in my life. And his work was, I put him up on a chair and put a crown on him and a sheet like a robe, because he had made himself, his mother had made him God of the universe. And he really thought he was. And other people thought he was. And so, since then I have seen him, and every time I see him, he'll say, I retired the crown. I no longer wear that crown. I put a crown on him, the whole thing. And I love watching people get in recovery, have that knowing that they do have a problem and are willing to take the action to okay, so less than or better than. Or the kid will be too vulnerable, where they have that sensitive little heart. I was one of the too vulnerable. Or invulnerable, where nothing bothers them. They have a wall up, and they've learned that. They've learned that in dysfunctional homes. They just put that wall up, nothing wrong here. And also they will either become bad and rebellious, that's the scapegoat, or they'll be good and perfect. These are the choices in dysfunctional homes. And this is the dysfunctional survival traits that kids pick up in order to survive dysfunction. Or they will become too dependent, where they cling. I didn't think I would ever be able to leave home and turn loose of my mother. I learned later I was dependent on her dependency toward me. It wasn't so much that I was so dependent on her. I was dependent on her needing me. That's what codependency is at the max. That's the reason I couldn't leave home, afraid something might happen to her. So they get too dependent on other people, or they get anti-dependent like I did, and needless and wantless, where you can do it yourself. You don't need people. And we all need people. And then they become extremely immature. This is your little scapegoat, your little mascot. Extremely immature, chaotic, that ADH kid, or overmature and controlling. The overmature is that hero child getting ready to become marry someone that they can control, or anyway. So they grow up. These kids grow up, and now they've got core symptoms. These are the core symptoms of adult codependence. Are y'all with me? These kids are getting ready to be full-blown codependents. And what happens, they have difficulty experiencing appropriate levels of self-esteem. Codependence, that's one of the biggest character defects, is or symptoms of codependency is low self-esteem. Now, we can cover that up and we act like, we're all of that and, a piece of cheese or whatever. We will overcompensate and we can look good from the outside. But we have difficulty experiencing levels of self-esteem. And that's in order to recover from codependency, you must get some self-esteem on board. This is why we say affirmations. You can change that brain, but you got to do something. And then another one is difficulty setting boundaries. Children who are raised in dysfunctional homes grow up without boundaries. They either have walls or they have, boundaries where they can put up a boundary with some people and not others, or they have zero boundaries. It's like, here I am, world, come and get me. So boundaries. In order to recover from codependency, those are the two most essential things to have on board: healthy self-esteem and how to set healthy boundaries. Know where you stop and someone else starts. When people hear setting boundaries, and I in the early days, I just would get sick of all of us trying to learn how to live out in the world and learn about codependency and adult children of alcoholics and all of that, and we'd take everything to the extreme. And so, we learned how to set boundaries where people wouldn't bother us, but then we forgot that we were boundary violators ourselves. We would be boundary violators. We would violate other people's boundaries by raging. My go-to was rage. Raging at them. Rage is the most childlike, one of the sickest, emotionally sick things. And I can say that because I'm a recovering rager. And if you're a rager, you're a pretty sick individual. If that is the only way that you have found to deal with people is through your rage, I would recommend that you look at it, because I'm getting angry just thinking about it. Anger is healthy. Healthy anger. We can all get angry. Jesus Christ got angry. It's what we do with that anger. But when we let it, hold it on the inside and hold it and let it build up and blow up, that's what rage is. So we can set healthy boundaries and not let anybody get into our boundary. I would get sick working with people. Well, I'm setting a boundary. Nobody's going to bother me. And then they would go out and offend others, like with rage or having an affair or whatever. I'm sure getting aggravated on this, aren't I? Okay, I've been doing this a long time. All right, here we go. All right, so boundaries. Difficulty owning and expressing our own reality and our imperfection. Codependents have a hard time being honest about who they are. Oh, we're so good at picking out your faults. We can nail you. We can tell you what's wrong with you, when we're into codependency. But in the early stages of recovery, codependents have a hard time owning their own reality and their imperfection, because these are grown-ups, these kids that were not nurtured in childhood, have had to find a way to live in adult life. And one of them is becoming, thinking that they're perfect, or, having that no imperfection. and having difficulty expressing their own reality. You know, I could tell you, I could work a room, I could go into a room, and I mean, I'm going to brag on myself, I pretty much could still do it. I could go into a room and I could diagnose everyone there in 30 minutes. You know, I'd go around, I'd visit people and meet them. I'm a people person. I'd go meet them, you know. That is codependency. I mean, that's how I got my good feelings about myself, because I could get in there and I could learn about them and I could break their boundary down. So, anyway, by the grace of God and a lot of recovery, I don't have to do that anymore. But anyway, I think that's how I got into the business, because I love to interview people. I still love to interview people. I love to ask questions. I'm a question person, and that's not all bad if if your motive is in the right place. My motive was always, how did what makes them operate? I wanted to know so I could emulate the good stuff and leave the bad stuff. I mean, because that's how I did got my parenting that I didn't get as a kid. I got it from everyone that I would meet. I would emulate other people because I didn't have enough self-esteem to know that I was okay within myself. Okay, so it's hard to own our own reality and our imperfection, and we have difficulty taking care of our own adult needs and wants. You know, a good codependent in the disease, they know what everyone else needs. I used to say my territory is about 100-mile radius around where I live. I mean, I could tell everybody, I could see them, bless their hearts. They need this, they need that. And I was always a human doer. And I would rescue people that didn't even want to be rescued or needed to be rescued. I needed them to need me. That's the only way I could operate in the world, is to be needed and wanted. But I didn't know how to get my own needs met. That's what codependency is. Not being able to know how to get your own adult needs and wants met. And I'll tell you, when you start in recovery, I know my experience was when I started in recovery, and it started in Al-Anon, people are not going to like the change in you, because as you begin to change and know yourself and can set boundaries and stop the overreacting or the underreacting, you know, just shutting down, people are not going to always like the recovery. Some of them won't even come along the journey with you. That's when you know who is really in your corner, if they will come along on the recovery journey with you. Okay, so the next one is difficulty experiencing and expressing our reality moderately. When Pia first wrote this, she wrote that last word instead of moderately. She said politically. You know, being political is being appropriate. Sometimes I'm not appropriate when I'm talking about politics. I'm not. So, and Missy's sitting over here laughing at me. She knows. And so Pia was kind of criticized, or that it pointed out she might want to use another word. So we, as untreated codependents, we know what other people are feeling, because we're around them and we are hyper vigilant, and we can, you know, tune in to them, and we can express their reality, but we can't express our own. We don't know what we need or want, because our needs were not acknowledged in childhood, and we carry this into our adult life. So we have that difficulty experiencing and expressing reality moderately. All right, so this is what happens when we get in relationships. We're not very good relationship material when we're, before recovery. So because we bring all of that dysfunction into the relationship with us. So one of them is negative control. We just have to control their reality so we'll feel better. That's what codependency is, controlling other people's reality. Are y'all with me? So we'll feel better. Codependency is not a pretty disease to have. You get a lot more acclimates being an alcoholic or a drug addict than you do codependent. And I'm not joking. Codependency is ugly when you're not in recovery. Okay, so negative control. We, try to control everyone around us. And then resentment. Uh, Resentment is having to, wanting to punish people that have done us wrong. I mean, they've got it coming. Do y'all ever watch Chicago? That, Broadway musical, they made it into, he had it coming. He shouldn't have been there. He shouldn't have done it. He had it coming. Anyway, I would sing it to you if I knew how to sing. But anyway, resentments are big in codependency. Resentments. Resentment is about somebody does something to you, and you get up every morning. This might have been 20 years ago, but we have such a good memory about what people did to us. We kind of forget what we did to them. Get up and start thinking about what somebody did to us. A resentment is we refill and replay that over and over and over and over in our mind. This is what happens when, as children, we were never allowed to have a negative thought or a feeling, and we were abused. And so this behavior grows out of the childhood. Now, we're not going to blame parents for that. We're not going to spend our life, because it's a waste of time, but we are going to do our childhood work around it. If you want to get well, you do. So resentments. And then we have what we bring into relationships is distorted, either a distorted view or non-existent spirituality. We will be over the top religious. Now there's a difference between being religious and being spiritual. People can be the most religious people in the world and not have one drop of blood of spirituality in them. There's a difference. If you don't know the difference, you might want to check that out. So we come into relationships either highly religious or no spirituality at all. And what that is having difficulty experience a connection to a power greater than ourselves. We codependents will make our partners the God of our understanding. If we're not in recovery, we'll put them up on the pedestal so they can fall off, and then we can resent them. This is what we do in relationships, folks, if we don't treat those childhood wounds. So impaired intimacy, having, we have codependents in the disease, have hold a lot of time sharing who we really are with other people, or hearing them share who they are. And you can get all one-sided about this, where you can just tell the world about yourself, and about the time they get ready to tell you something about themselves, you're walking off, Or the reverse of that, you never tell anyone anything about yourself, but you can pull out information from other people. So there needs to be a balance in that. Because in childhood, if you were raised in a dysfunctional home, you wouldn't listen to, or you were, like me, put up on a pedestal. I wasn't put up on a pedestal. I was made to grow up too quick and given jobs that make you feel like you're not a kid, and that anyway, and you are, and you don't have the tools to be an adult, and so that makes you feel very impaired, and it gives you you have difficulty being one-on-one with people, nose to nose, eye to eye. We either are up here or down there. All right, now I'm going to kick you in the stomach here. This last one is about how we parent. I know none of you, some of you might still have younger ones. This is how we parent. Dysfunctional parenting of our children. If you grow up in dysfunction, unless you get into recovery, you'll be a dysfunctional parent. Add it up. The inability to appropriately esteem our children. If we don't have healthy self-esteem, how can we esteem our children? My healthy self-esteem came from my kids doing things and making me look good, and I couldn't give them. I got my self-esteem from them. That is not the way that it's to operate. So, uh, inability to avoid. We don't set healthy boundaries with our own kids. We are boundary violators with our own children. How you teach children to set boundaries is you set boundaries with them. You set boundaries with them, your own boundary. And you teach them that it's okay. Go back to Spencer. Uh, he was taught early on, how to set boundaries. And, we were all learning. And so to this day, I don't assume that anyone wants a hug from me unless it's been negotiated. And then, okay, so we love each other, and every time we see each other, we're going to hug. I don't have that with a lot of people, because I used to hug anybody that crossed my path, even if they didn't want to be hugged. I did that because that's what I wanted. So we give what we usually, want. So with Spencer, he was taught if he didn't want to be hugged, I'd say, Spencer, are you up for a hug? He might be 7 or 8 years old, or 10 or 12 or 20, whatever. He said, no, Minnie, not today, not right now, maybe later. That would be a kid. He didn't want to be hugged. Maybe he was, doing homework or whatever. He did not want a hug from Minnie at that moment. He knew he could set a boundary. And no is a complete sentence. And I will tell you, he still sets boundaries. If he doesn't want to do something, he is not afraid to say, and he doesn't do it real blunt. Well, no, Minnie, I don't think so, not today, but thanks. He does not mind telling anybody no. And that's honest. That puts us all on equal playing ground. Otherwise, you're making up what you think they want, and we give people things, or we do for others, that they don't even want done for them, because we don't bother to ask. We give in order to receive, so we'll feel better. So, okay, and then what we have a hard time doing is allowing our kids to have their own imperfection. We want them to be little soldiers and make us look good. Unhealthy parents, that's what we bring into our parenting, is not allowing them to be who God uniquely made them to be. And I'll tell you about children who taught me the lesson that I needed to let my kids be who they were, and that was my little scapegoat, Kim. She taught, because she would not do one thing that she didn't want to do, or she was nobody's people pleaser, and if she didn't want to do something, her no was complete, and so she taught me a lot. And then the others would do whatever I told them to do, and that's not good. But I will tell you, today I have 4 healthy children, and I want to give you this birth order. Usually it's the first one that's the hero child. Actually, who was the hero child is Christy Kay. My youngest daughter, she was the lost child for the longest, and then she stepped up and she became the hero child. She still is the hero child. Kim had a little puppy dog to die last week. It was so sad, and we were all at the vet's office getting ready to have him put out, and we were all in there surrounding. The room was full. We were supporting Kim and the puppy dog, and the nurse was there, and the doctor was there, and Kim looked around and said, "Where's Christy? Where's Christy?" And that's how our family is. We can't, Christy has taken, we have given her, I guess, that leadership role of the hero child. My son is the scapegoat. You'd think he was the hero, but he's not. No, he's not the scapegoat. He's the funny one. He's the so each one, and then Karen did play that hero child, but she played more of a lost child role. So each one of them might look one way, but they actually, when you start looking at those roles, are entirely different. Okay, so we have an inability to nurture our children. We can't give what we didn't receive. It's hard to love, to really give healthy love, to know what is healthy and what's extreme. The energy, by the way, comes from the parent to the child, not the child to the parent. Yeah, our kids are going to love us, but if you expect your good feelings to come from your children, you're setting yourself and your kids up. The energy needs to come from the parent to the child. Like, notice when you are, if you're going to hug a child, will you come here? I just want to hug you. You notice, are you wanting something from that child? And I will tell you, it's warm and fuzzy to get, to hold a child. You're going to get something out of that. But if your life depends on a kid giving you love, that is codependency to the max. And that child will grow up knowing that. And they will push away, and they will grow up to be your avoidance addict. It's like, do not touch me. I had enough of that in childhood. So, all right, so the last one is we have an inability to provide a stable environment for our children. If we can't, don't recover from our childhood, how we lived in dysfunction in our childhood, we're going to bring that into our family where we're raising children. And my intention was absolutely the opposite. I was going to have the healthiest family, and I will tell you, we were a looking good family. We looked good from the outside. We fooled a lot of people, and you can do that. But it's what happens on the inside. What happens on the inside. So I know I've got off on all this, but when talking about codependency, because of Pia Melody, and Pia Melody, dear friend, died a couple of months ago, but she will live on forever because of her work. And I want to tell you what Pia has done. When you trained with Pia, when you went and trained, and this is not so for all the trainers, when you go train with Pia, it cost a lot of money. I trained with her off and on for a year. All total, that was about $20,000. But I got a lot. And when you trained with Pia, you could use any piece of her literature. You could copy it. I mean, she was generous. A lot of trainers are not like that. They don't want you copying any of their material. So anyway, I want to give that. A lot of what we do here, I don't know why I'm feeling the need to really talk about Pia, but I do miss her and I've been out of contact with her for years, but we used to travel together and I trained with her and all. But she's the one that gave us this, that codependency starts in childhood. That's the point. So this is why it's important to work on your childhood, those things that's happened to you in childhood. And I want to tell you, it doesn't have to be any great big, child abuse. It could be a day in the life of a child. It's different. It can be a harsh word said. It can be a lot of different things. If you have a memory of something that happened to you in childhood and you've carried that over into your adult life, you must work on it and get some relief and let it go. So that's what I have, and I've given you a lot of information in a short period of time. You got this, everyone, not everyone, but most of you have done intensives here, and so you've heard this, and now you get to hear it again. So codependency, if you are a codependent, go back and look at your childhood and see where it started and how you can give it up today. There's a difference between being codependent and being caring. Absolutely, we can care for others. But, codependency, being healthy is doing for others without expecting anything in return. You do it for free and for fun. without expecting anything in return. Also, you wait to be asked. A good codependent can look at a situation and charge in, and sometimes an emergency will happen, and maybe it warrants coming in and taking action. But I'm talking about where codependents can look around and see something needs to be done, and they'll rush in and take over a situation that the people do not want them to take over. So there's a balancing act there. Ask before you barge in. Ask if you're what you can do. So that's a lot of information. We'll take a few minutes. Anyone have anything they want to say?